The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the REMI Tax PI for Fiscal and Economic Analysis webinar, which is being presented by Julian Cook. Julian has been an economic associate at REMI for 2 years now and specializes in providing support to clients in the Four Corners region, and he is based out of New York City. I am Brian Reel, the marketing intern at REMI, and I'll be hosting today's webinar. Tax PI is the premium tool for evaluating the dynamic economic and fiscal effects of tax and other policy changes, and Julian is going to be demonstrating some very powerful tools within the model. You can ask a question for Julian at any time, and if time permits, he will answer them at the end. If we run out of time, we'll be sure to personally reach out to anybody we missed. Take it away, Julian.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Let's see. So hopefully everyone can hear and see me okay. I see myself on here. Okay. Hide this taskbar. Yeah, so welcome everyone to the model training series. Today we're going to walk through Tax PI, the new version 3.0, highlighting some of the updates and also walking through some basic scenarios and then kind of diving into some specific features of the model as well. This is meant to be an overview training, covering some of the most basic elements of the model, but at the same time, we're not afraid to get into the nitty-gritty if need be. First, we're just going to run through a quick PowerPoint introduction to REMI and Tax PI for anyone who might be new to who we are. So very quickly, REMI's been around since 1980. We offer a suite of economic modeling tools that are used in a variety of spaces. Tax PI is mostly used in the revenue space at a state level for forecasting budgets, but we have other models that are tailored for specific industries. So we have our Translite model, for example, used for transportation by a lot of DOTs. We have our E3 Plus model, which is the intersection of energy, environment, and the economy. We have our PI Plus, and that's our flagship model. It's what every other one is based off of. Basic economic modeling through that. It's used a lot. A wide variety of clients use that since it's the most, it's the basic one. And finally, I'm missing SEI is our newest module that we've added. We won't be covering it today, but it breaks out outputs into different demographic categories. So you can look at the impacts of public policy through different lenses, such as age, race, gender, educational attainment, income quintile, meant to address all those DEI questions that might be coming down. But yeah, we work across the country at both a national, state, and local scale. Yeah, and so today we'll be covering Tax PI, a tool for evaluating total fiscal and economic effects of tax policy changes, as well as any other public changes or shocks to any regional economy. It can capture the direct, indirect, and induced fiscal effects of taxation. And part of the new update is that we can now forecast out to 2080, whereas it used to be 2060. The Tax PI model has a user-defined revenue and expenditure category, so you can upload your budget with the most up-to-date years and tax receipts you may have. There's an automatic budget balancer that is both demand or revenue driven. That's a useful tool. We'll be highlighting that as well. And finally, it accommodates states' economic, demographic, and fiscal projections. So there is that demographic and fiscal component is also built in. And this is a very quick outline of some of the capabilities of the model. You can model any policy producing accurate results. And as I mentioned before, there's a way to show the dynamic responses to any regional shock. Our models come in either 23, 70, or 160 industry sectors. Those are based off of NAICS codes. The model we're using today will be a 70 sector, and I believe Tax PI only comes in 70 or 160. And finally, the models are used to really understand how policy is affecting your specific region and economic and demographic context. Here's a list of some of our clients. Some of you might be here today. If so, welcome. Some of you might be prospective, but just to show that we work around the country in a variety of ways in our model. Yeah, so this is the structure, kind of showing the dynamic feedback and how the budget balances itself to produce those impact results. This is just a helpful graphic to understand how the tax policy change feeds into the model and then is able to produce the results that we'll be seeing. And this is what I was expecting, the model applications across the country. So we can do, and the remedy model has been used in these studies by some of our clients. So for corporate tax rate reduction analysis, Medicaid expansion analysis in both North Carolina and Oklahoma. I think that was a modernization one, yeah. And then Texas, we looked at a statutory impact analysis requirement for appropriations legislation. Washington, we did aerospace tax credit analysis, and then Arkansas, remedy was used for an analysis of the Big River Steel manufacturing facility. And so, yeah, now I'll pull up the model and we can get going. Okay, so this is the homepage. Today I've got a 3.0 version of a Virginia model, single region, 70 industry sectors, and you can see it's forecasting out to 2080. You might notice the homepage is a little different than previous versions. You're greeted immediately with the new regional simulation. That's what most of our users' go-to button is. And to talk a little bit about how the model works, you see these standard national and regional controls. Those are the baseline forecast for which the regional simulations are compared to. So the national forecast is developed by us, and then it's scaled down to a regional level. So for that the state of Virginia region, it's scaled down and compared to the regional simulation. If you click here, you can make a new national simulation or change the regional or national control if you have more up-to-date data, for example. And for context, our data mostly comes from the BEA, BLS, and the Census Bureau, as well as University of Michigan's RSQE forecasting lab. And I think that's about it. There's a couple others, or maybe one more that I'm missing, but those are the main few. And then we've added this recent tab to see kind of what you've been working with most recently if you want to pin it. So it's more permanent on the homepage. It's just this little pin button. Make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah, so that's the new homepage, a little more streamlined. And so the first thing to do with TaxPI is to run the budget in order to run a simulation that has the budget forecasted out to whatever year we're looking at. So we go to the budget. This has already been input, but if you wanted to enter your own, you would just add a new budget. But for the sake of the demo, we've already put it in. It's a fairly simple one. So here we see the revenues coming in the form of a sales tax, income tax, corporate tax, and a property tax, as well as miscellaneous fees. And then we've got 4 expenditure categories here. And we'll be adding, a little later on the demo, we'll be adding a revenue stream to show you how that works. Yeah, so let's forecast this out, and we've only put it in for 3 years, so we need to make sure we have the rest of it forecasted out. So I'll just cancel that, and then if we double click on this, I'll let it load for a second. So here we have the baseline forecast for context. But if we run back to forecast options in the top left, we'll disable the balanced budget feature for now. We'll activate that later. But you would just run it. And we're running it to 2040 just for the sake of speed. If we ran it to 2080, it would take maybe a minute more. So now we can save this forecast. Forecast is saved. We can close it, and then we can pop back over to the home page and start with the new regional simulation. And you choose the budget you were working with. So this is the one we just ran. And you'll see that the regional simulation homepage is also a little different. We've changed it. It used to look like this. So if you click on tiles down here, you can get back to the old tile layout. But the search feature is still, it's the quickest way to pull up any variable you might want to play around with. And again, if you're new to Remy, you can find a full list of variables here. Just could be helpful to inform yourself. We won't go through all of these, of course, but just good to know that they are there. But so for the purpose of today's demo, we wanted to look at a couple of scenarios. So the first one, we're going to be comparing two scenarios in which the local government wants to offer an incentive to either a computer manufacturer or a warehouse warehousing job provider. And they're trying to figure out how big of an incentive they can offer for this. And we're assuming we're adding 2,000 jobs for each of those. So first, we're going to just add employment for, and actually I'll go back to make sure. So this was in my recent searches, but if we just search employment, everything related to employment should come up. If it's been tagged or if it has employment in the name, it should come up. And even it should work with typos as well, or small typos. But if we click this, we'll start putting in our employment. So we're assuming that we're adding 2,000 jobs to the economy in the computer and electronic product manufacturing. So we'll add 2,000 jobs, and so this is a one region model, so it's just the state of Virginia. And we'll add it from 2024 to 2040. We'll add 2,000 jobs. And so the goal of this exercise is to figure out how much or how large of an incentive can be offered to this employer in order to settle within this economy, given that they're providing or adding 2,000 jobs. And to be clear, so when you're inputting jobs like this, they're not adding on top of each other. It's the same 2,000 jobs that exist every year. And if you wanted to interpolate or have exponential growth, you could do that with the calculator function. So I'll go back, right click and click on the calculator, and then you can play around with all these tabs to basically input the jobs or whatever input you're putting in, however you like. But for this case, we're keeping it simple with just 2,000 every year until 2040, starting in 2024. So we'll add that to the inputs, and we forgot to name it. So if we just click that, we can add manufacturing jobs. And if you want to see more detail, you hit this little plus button. It pops down, you see the 2,000 jobs. Now we go over to the forecast options. We're running it on that budget. We're running it out to 2040. We could do less, but since we ran our budget out to 2040, that's the max for this scenario. But if we had run it to 2080, we could be running out to 2080. Great. Let's run it and see what we get. Okay, it's loading up. So obviously those 2,000 jobs are having a huge effect on employment as a whole. And this is the same in all our models. This economic summary pops up no matter what model you're using. And then we can dig deeper into where the employment is being sourced or where it's coming from. So if we just sort year by clicking on the year, you can sort. I think first it's from smallest to largest. If you click again, it goes from largest to smallest. So we're seeing those 2,000 jobs in the sector we played around with, but then we're seeing that construction and retail trade we're pretty heavily tied to that. So that's a good idea of what's being affected. And if we go, let's see. So here we can see under analytical tools in the direct, indirect, and induced impacts. You're able to see those impacts on that level, seeing which ones, and this is in terms of output, but we could look at employment again, but for the sake of variety, let's look at output. So the total output is up here. It breaks it down by those different categories that I mentioned. Perfect. So I think now we can go into the budget and see what what adding 2,000 jobs has done to the budget. So you can look at it either by graph or table here on the side. You can look at them both at the same time. If you just click on this line chart right here, they show up simultaneously. So we're seeing an increase here in revenues as well as expenditures, but revenues tend to are separated by a pretty large margin. So we can take this to a Excel sheet. If we just copy and paste it, Control C, and I've already prepared this, but essentially we're just adding up revenues and expenditures and subtracting expenditures from revenues to get this total incentive amount down here. So this is in millions of dollars. So theoretically, in this scenario, you could offer the computer manufacturer an incentive of $1.68 million to set up shop in your region. And just to showcase, so we'll save this forecast. We can call it comp manufacturing employment. Forecast saved. We can close it. And now, for the sake of highlighting, to highlight the difference in industries and how the model works differently with different industries, we can do the same thing with a warehousing employer that wants to set up shop. And we'll do the same number of jobs in the same region, same years. Calculator. Again, we're adding 2,000 jobs every year until 2040. Got to name it again. These are warehousing jobs. And the details are down here. And say you had a more in-depth scenario with many inputs, you could turn them on and off for the forecast simply by clicking this checkbox here. That will activate it or deactivate. So right now with the check, it's active. So if we run it with the same budget, same number of years, we'll see similar numbers in terms of total employment. It's a little less. But then if we go to the budget, we're seeing here that expenditures take over for revenues. So we can already kind of assume that there shouldn't be an incentive offered here. But for the exercise, we can just plug it in and get an idea of the number. So yeah, there's essentially a negative value here, which means it's essentially not worth offering a incentive. So we can save this too, and we'll be coming back to it later in our studies tab. So warehousing. Okay, we can shut that down. And so all of our forecasts are now saved in the forecast tab under this budget. Ignore that up here. So we have our two scenarios here, and then now for the second half or middle part of the walkthrough, thought it would be a good idea to do a gas policy change, or not a gas policy, a tax policy change. We'll be looking at a sales tax and a gas tax. So for this one, let's see, I'm just checking over. We need to run the budget again, but this time we want to have that dynamic feedback to really resonate with the policy changes if they're tax related. So we have this balanced budget feedback checkbox. If you enable it, we'll run it out to 2040 again, just because to remain consistent. And we can run it, and it'll run an iteration of 5 times to balance the budget, so that anytime we make a tax change, it'll be reflected in the budget for the state. So, for example, a sales tax cut will result in a cut in government spending, and that'll feed back until the budget is balanced. And this takes a minute. We have to let all 5 run, and then we can get into it. So I'll let it run, and then we'll get into modeling a sales tax cut. Okay, so this is our baseline. It's all set here, and the budgets should be balanced out after. Yep. So the revenues and expenditures equal each other. So we can close. We save this first. We can close it. And now let's go back to the home page. We're running a new simulation with the same budget as before, but this time it'll run that balance module. And for a tax change, you can either do a revenue change or an expenditure change. In this case, it's a sales tax cut, so it'll be a revenue change. And so we click that. We'll name it beforehand this time. Sales tax cut. We'll select the revenue stream we're playing around with by units, millions, and same region, add it to editor. We can edit the values, and we'll start in 2023 and maybe go out to 2030. I did this earlier with a $50 million decrease, so minus 25 every 6 months. Yeah, so that's 50 million a year in sales tax cuts. We can add that to the inputs, and that's our sole input. So if we run the forecast, we're running it now with the input. It has to feedback, so again, it'll take a minute or so. And something to mention is that all of our models come with unlimited training and technical support. So we do have these webinars occasionally for broad training, but if a specific question comes up or you're having issues with the model getting stuck somewhere, we can hop on a call. One of our analysts can hop on a call and try to figure it out and help you with your modeling. Just to clarify that this isn't the only resource you have. Okay, so we ran it. We're seeing a negative employment number here. That's likely due to job losses in government with that associated with that tax cut. And if we wanted to double check that, we could look in employment. And if we look at it by industry, I think government jobs are somewhere. Yeah, so if we look at state and local, that's obviously having the largest decline since a tax cut will directly affect the government employment. But if we go back, we can kind of get a better picture here of what might be going on. So we're seeing the sales tax have a loss in employment of about 300 jobs. And what's going up here? Private non-farm employment is increasing slightly, and real disposable income is increasing as well. So your dollar's stronger, but you may have lost your job. But if we look at the budget, should be balanced. Yeah, and so it's that minus 50 that we input. And again, you can look at it through, I don't know if I did this earlier, but you can look at it through the different streams of revenue or the expenditure funnels and see where everything is going as it's balancing out. Okay, so we'll save this one to, this is our sales tax cut. And again, all these simulations are oversimplified for the sake of the demo. Close that. And okay, so now let's say we wanted to model a gas tax cut, but we know our budget as it stands doesn't have a gas tax revenue stream. So we could add a revenue called gas, maybe pick an arbitrary number, $55 million, or maybe we'll start at 58 54. Yes. Can assume that that's a valid revenue stream for gas tax. And then we want to shut this, save it, and update the forecast. Yeah, and so to update the forecast, we have to run it back essentially with those 5 years and with the, let's just double check if we actually put it in the revenues. Yeah, so now we're seeing the gas revenue stream added, but all these numbers are NA for the moment since we haven't run the budget yet, which we'll do right now. And so what we're doing now is essentially the same thing with the sales tax cut. We'll go back into the revenue changes tab, add a gas holiday, and explore some of the output stuff. But just to show you that you can add, it's important to add a revenue stream, run the budget, and then run your policy change to show you the order of things. And after that, we'll go into the studies tab, and I'll show you the basic use, and then I'll pull up an older model with kind of the detailed how it should look. That you'll see what I mean when we get there. Okay. So now it's populated. It's no longer NA, and this is 0. Did we not put in our? Let's troubleshoot this. Oh no. Okay. It's. Why is it not working? Okay. Let's save it for now and just double check this. Not we can just run it for the sake of time, but let's see, edit. Okay. Well, let's just run our scenario. We have the gas tax variable. Go home, new simulation, the budget. We'll do a revenue change. The computer catch up with me. And now we have the gas revenue stream, the nominal millions values. And then let's do till 2025 and do a gas holiday or gas tax decrease of 10 million a year, let's say. All right, and again, still here. We run it, and it'll iterate 5 times. Yeah, and so maybe I can talk a little bit about some of the drivers behind the revenue stream. So for the corporate tax, it's really driven by output. Sales tax is driven by consumption. Income tax is driven by personal income. Property tax driven by residential and non-residential property values. And then those fees are just miscellaneous fees. And I can show you how you can tie those, how those revenue streams are tied to those different outputs. We can dig into the budget after we take a look at this. So we're seeing the overall economic effects of a gas tax of, I think we did 20 million over 4 years. Yeah, so until 2027, we're getting to negative, and then it starts to balance out. Maybe it wasn't the strongest policy. And yeah, the budget's balanced. Okay, so let's save this as our gas tax cut. Okay, and just to dig in and show you how you can take a look at. So the budget, if you go in, you hit edit, push continue, yes. and then say you want to see what sales are essentially pegged to. Click the little pencil, see the indicator, click on the indicator, and so yeah, it's tied to personal consumption expenditures, or driven by consumption expenditures. And you can do that with all of these to figure out and to change anything that you might want to. Okay, let's save that. I don't think we changed anything. We'll do that later. Maybe it wants us to. We'll just save it. Update it now. Okay. So the last thing I wanted to touch on was the Studies tab. So this is helpful for comparing different scenarios and essentially creating your own ranking and scoring system for each policy or each shock to the economy, and figuring out which one kind of ranks above the other in terms of impact. So if we wanted to create a new study, we can ignore this ranking study 1, a forecast ranking. And actually, first things first, we have to save our policy variable. So we'll just do these two. I think. Hit export results now. If we hit edit inputs, yeah, so we can export this scenario just in this folder here. Let's call this one comp jobs. And these are just other ones I was playing around with, but so we'll save that one, and then we'll save this one. Edit inputs again, just to be clear how to do this. Edit imports, edit inputs, export. Hit export again down here, and then you can save it to the same folder. Where do you have? Oh, I think this one was actually computer employment. So now we're doing warehousing. Okay. We can shut it. And then now when we go to studies and we add a new study, we should be able to import those policy variables. So we have our warehousing and employment and our computer manufacturing employment. And so those are both added now. You could theoretically add as many as you need. And then moving on to the forecasts, we can use rank simulation and just run it until 2040. And again, I'm just not running it at 2080 because it would take a little longer, and we're being a little speedy. So start the run, it'll run the simulation for each policy. And so now you have the option of, so we have 3 here. We have a population score, a GDP score, and an employment score. So you can kind of see how this would look if it were a real study in a real policy scenario. You could add more scoring or attribute scores as well. That kind of gets added as another subsection. But just to walk you through how that would work, just click on Add Economic Score, pick a commonly used or search your own. Let's see, we have employment, GDP, and population, so maybe we can do personal income. Let's say we would like to include that. So select it, and then up here it's kind of, what's the best way to describe this? A railway maybe of a menu. So you kind of just work your way across, you choose what you want. So we're going to do a ranking score, do the automatic yearly average. And this is to make sure that that the top rank is kind of, it's customizing that it's not the inverse. Because in some cases it would be. So get the summary, and then we can save it right here, personal income score, close it. And so now it's been added. It's the same. So if we, and actually, so this is why I had this older model here. One of our analysts built a very comprehensive forecast ranking study, and I just wanted to show you what this could look like. You would run through the same process in either model. But so if we just double click, I just want to show you what a forecast ranking study could look like when it's more comprehensive, with a little more detail. So we're seeing here that, sorry, this menu is in my way. If I can move it. Okay. Yeah, so we're seeing the different scores, employment, GDP, and then we can even do qualitative scoring. So you would essentially assign each of these qualitative values a number. So from greatest, smallest to largest, essentially. And I actually just saw a summary. Yeah, so for example here, very difficult to pass, minus 10 points, neutral, 0 points, easy to pass, 10 points, slightly easy to pass, 5 points. Kind of self-explanatory. And then at the end, you get a final score where you can figure out which scenario is having the greatest effect based on the values you've chosen. So just an easy way to compare policies. It's a useful tool in the model rather than having to go in and run each scenario and export it to an Excel sheet and figure out that way. You can do it through this handy option within the model. Yeah, and I think that's basically it on my end. So yeah, again, we see our smaller study creator here. We'll close it. We don't need to save our changes. But yeah, I think that's a good overview of the model. We have our model details down here. I mean, this stuff is kind of all the same with the tools and settings here. You can set your preferences, some customization. Say you had multiple regions and wanted to group a couple counties together, you could do that in here. Yeah, general settings over here, as well as the user's guide and everything else down here. And again, we're always available for more hands-on training. Just please don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to accommodate any needs. Thank you all for coming. I hope this was helpful. And yeah, I think we'll turn it over for some questions now. I'll pass it back off to Brian.
So we actually don't have any questions as of now, but if anyone does have any questions, feel free to reach out to info@remi.com, and we'll gladly set up a meeting to assist you in any way we can and to help you out. So thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you, Julian, for the great presentation. And a link to the recording is going to be available shortly, and it'll be emailed to everybody here. So again, thank you for joining us in this segment of the training series. And again, don't be afraid to reach out if you have any questions. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.